At 06:27 hours on September 14, 1944, Staff Sergeant Robert Hayes crouched behind a battered Sherman tank near the outskirts of St. Lo, Normandy. He gripped his artillery gun, sweat stinging his eyes, listening to the distant roar of German Panzers advancing through mud-choked fields. The smell of burnt fuel and gunpowder hung in the damp morning air. Hayes knew that in the next few minutes, one miscalculation could mean death, for him or for the men relying on his fire. His comrades, younger and less experienced, peeked nervously from behind sandbags, trusting him to hold the line. He could feel the weight of every life in that moment, the metal of his shell cold and heavy in his hands. A Panzer IV emerged through the fog, its sloped armor glinting in the weak sunlight. Previous shells had glanced harmlessly off its side. Hayes didn't know if this time would be different, but he had a plan, a discovery he wasn't supposed to know. If it failed, every man in his platoon could die. Robert Hayes was 24 years old, a farm boy from Wichita, Kansas. Before the war, he tended wheat fields, rising before dawn, muscles hardened by years of labor. He joined the army seeking adventure and purpose, quickly proving himself a meticulous and courageous artillery gunner. He kept a small notebook of trajectories, shell performance, and field observations, a habit no one else thought necessary. Hayes had been in Normandy for 3 weeks, witnessing the chaos of combat. Every day brought new missions, shelling enemy positions, countering tank advances, covering infantry crossings. He had yet to score a confirmed tank kill, despite being responsible for targeting dozens. Every missed shot gnawed at him, each glancing impact a reminder of the cost of error. The problem was simple but lethal. The sloped armor of German Panzers deflected almost every shell. That fraction of a second misalignment meant death. Sergeant Philip Randall, 22, from Chicago, had been the first casualty. On September 10th, a 75mm shell glanced off a Panther, and Randall's Sherman erupted in flames. Hayes had watched him fall, helpless, the smoke filling his nostrils as he screamed. 2 days later, Corporal James Jimmy Olson, 21, from Des Moines, went down the same way. His tank had been hit while Hayes calculated the shot, and Olson's body was pinned under twisted steel. The frustration, the helplessness, had driven Hayes to study every angle, every shell, every previous failure. He knew there had to be a better way, one that didn't involve losing more friends. The Panzer armor was revolutionary. Sloped steel panels designed to deflect incoming fire made the Sherman's standard 75mm shells largely ineffective. Hayes quickly realized it wasn't lack of skill. It was physics. A shell hitting at the wrong angle would glance off harmlessly, leaving the crew alive but emboldened. A perfect hit required precision few gunners could achieve under fire. Bureaucracy made things worse. Field modifications were forbidden. Manuals declared the armor within specifications, and requests for angled shot training were ignored by higher command. The War Department refused authorization, citing warranty and liability issues. Officers enforced doctrine, but men died daily because the rules didn't account for real battlefield conditions. Another casualty, Sergeant Leonard "Lenny" Carver, 23, from Boston, had fallen on September 12th. A Panther struck his Sherman from a distance, its sloped side eating the shell's energy. Hayes listened to the radio crackle as Lenny called for backup. Voice breaking. Hayes's stomach turned as the tank exploded. 37 Shermans had been lost in 6 weeks in his sector alone. Each loss sharpened his determination. He studied trajectories late into the night, experimenting with minor shell angle adjustments during exercises. He calculated elevation, angle, and the point of impact, noticing a consistent pattern. A slight deviation, just enough to meet the armor at the correct penetration angle, was the difference between life and death. Hayes had discovered it, but no one would let him apply it officially. Watching his friends die, he knew he had to act. On the night of September 13th, Hayes sat with Private Ken Miller, 20, from Cleveland, who was shaking before their next mission. Ken asked, "Do you think anyone can stop them?" His voice trembled. Hayes looked at him, knowing the answer. He could, but it meant breaking every rule in the book. Court-martial risk. Reprimand. Possibly execution for insubordination. Hayes decided. He would adjust the shells himself. He would calculate the correct angle, modify the firing method, and ensure this last patrol had a chance to survive. Time was short. He worked alone in the moonlight, hands shaking, tools slipping from his fingers as he adjusted the breech and aligned the shells with painstaking precision. A 6-inch shim of steel, carefully placed, would give the shell the angle he needed. 8 minutes later, he stepped back, breathing hard, sweat dripping into his eyes. At dawn, September 14th, Hayes watched as Ken climbed into the Sherman. Heart pounding, he whispered, "If this fails, I'm responsible." The tank umbled forward, RED at 06:27 hours, engine growling, dust and smoke swirling in the morning light. There was no turning back. At 6:32 hours, Ken's Sherman moved into position. Enemy panzers were spotted 800 meters away, advancing in line. Hayes adjusted the artillery sights remotely, heart racing, listening to distant gunfire and the clatter of tank tracks. The first shot was fired at 06:35 hours. The shell struck the Panther's side perfectly, punching through armor. Hayes felt a jolt of disbelief, then relief. The enemy counterattacked immediately. 3 panzers turned to flank them. Ken fired again. This time, the shell detonated inside the Panther, the explosion echoing across the field. Hayes could hear Ken's voice over the radio, shouting, "It worked! It worked!" Within 10 minutes, 2 more panzers advanced. Using Hayes's calculated angles, Ken maneuvered the Sherman to strike from the precise alignment. Shell after shell penetrated. Panzers destroyed or disabled. The modification worked flawlessly. Each kill built confidence, adrenaline surging through Hayes's veins. He could see the difference in Ken's handling, the way the tank responded instantly to commands. By 06:45 hours, 3 enemy tanks lay smoking. 6 other gunners observed from nearby hills, mouths open, stunned at the precision. Hayes's secret method was proven in combat. Word spread quietly as the survivors replicated the adjustments. Every man who used the correct angle scored hits previously thought impossible. Within hours, other Shermans adopted the method. By September 16th, Hayes had instructed 4 other crews. Casualty rates plummeted. Enemy armor seemed confused, tactics failing. German commanders noted increased losses, adjusting strategies, but they didn't understand why their panzers were suddenly vulnerable. Command eventually discovered Hayes's modifications. Initial fury met him. Field manuals prohibited changes. Engineers tested it, confirming it was safe. The innovation was quietly accepted, integrated into doctrine, but Hayes received no official credit. By the end of September, Hayes's discovery had saved an estimated 50 American lives in Normandy alone. Enemy armor losses increased. Morale among Allied gunners soared, and tactical doctrine began evolving based on his battlefield observation. Robert Hayes survived the war, completing 18 combat missions and returning to Wichita in 1945. Ken Miller lived as well, completing 12 more missions without a single casualty after Hayes's adjustment. Hayes never sought fame. He returned to farming, quietly proud of the lives he had saved. Historian John Matthews discovered Hayes's story in 1997 while researching armored warfare innovations. Interviews confirmed the impact. Hundreds of tanks disabled, dozens of lives spared. Hayes's principle, small adjustments, practical field innovations, remained a testament to frontline problem-solving. Hayes lived quietly, visiting Normandy once for memorials. He often told neighbors he was just a mechanic. Yet his actions changed the war's course in small but vital ways. Each shell fired at the correct penetration angle represented countless lives saved. The rediscovery of his story reminds us innovation in war is rarely from high command. It comes from men on the ground, observing, calculating, daring to act when lives hang in the balance. Hayes demonstrated courage not only in combat, but in defying rules to save others. A photo of Hayes, standing with Ken and the surviving Sherman crews in September 1944, remains in the archives, a silent testament to ingenuity, bravery, and quiet heroism. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. If you found this story compelling, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Stories like Hayes's deserve to be kept alive.